What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina Conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Stacy Stokes. We are talking about The Darkness Rises. That book is available now. Really enjoyable conversation with Stacy. This book is a YA mystery novel, but it also approaches a controversial American issue in that YA setting, in that high school setting. So I really appreciated and enjoyed her approach, and she made it really entertaining. And I just really enjoyed talking to her about the research that she did, things that she learned, and then also just how she was able to get in the mindset of a teenager, as challenging as that could be for writers. But either way, I'll let you guys get to it. Here is Stacy. Today we've got Stacy Stokes. We are talking about The Darkness Rises. That book is available now. Stacy, thank you so much for joining me today. This book, I like YA. I like the YA angle of it, but we're going to talk about some dark themes, and I really appreciated how you approached controversial topic and just brought light to it and added like a paranormal spin to it, like a fantastical spin, if you will, to just not I felt like you weren't shoving it down our throats per se, but it added to it while bringing attention to it. And I was really happy that I had the opportunity to read this book. And so we're going to get into it today. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Let's do it.
Yeah. I know. I was trying to psych myself up for this conversation because we're going to get into it. So before we get started, can you give like a summary or synopsis of the book so that listeners can follow along if they haven't read it yet?
Yep. So, The Darkness Rises is a book about a girl named Whitney who sees dark clouds hovering over people's heads when they're about to die. And she has the ability to basically save them and stop that from happening. So, her whole life, she has always intervened whenever she sees a cloud over somebody's head, never really stopped to question why, until one day she saves a boy from her school. And a few days after she saves him, he goes on to be the perpetrator of a shooting at a football game. So the book takes place a year later, almost a year later, and she is trying to cope with her own guilt over what happened. The community is trying to move on, and she's really punishing herself for everything that's happened. She also tries very hard not to save people because now she starts to wonder, what are the consequences of these choices that I've made. But of course, somebody has found out her secret and then discovers that she had a role in what happened the year before, and she finds an ominous note in her locker and discovers that somebody is out for revenge. And so she's got to figure out who it is before it's too late.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot to unpack there. It's just so many implications, and I just appreciated that you delivered it in a way that was digestible and meaningful, and I didn't feel too bombarded by the existential questions that one would ask it because at the end of the day, it's like, would I save a life as I've been doing, knowing that like the person I saved could do horrible things or just
Right.
and in Whitney's case, the person that she saved, it wasn't just he did a horrible thing to affect like one person. He like it damaged like a whole community. Like it was multiple lives and that were ended, multiple lives that were injured, multiple lives that were affected, and like the whole community, the whole camaraderie of it all. Like and it's her community, and it was just it's so much more far reaching than that one person, and where she was just trying to be there for that one person.
Right.
And it being in high school, oh my god, senior year, she's supposed to be like preparing, excited, and she wasn't a typical teenager to begin with, but she tried.
Yeah.
And it was just that's that I think oh my god, we can get into it, but yeah, I'm wondering, okay, anyway, before I get into all that, I want to go into your background because I know this is your second book, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to explore like your background and like your experiences and what led you to release this story into the world.
Yeah. So I've been, I'd say, writing on and off my whole life. It just took me a little while to really get to the place where I had a finished book that was, I'd say, worthy of publication. I had to learn my craft and everything like that. So I actually wrote a draft of The Darkness Rises before I even started what became my first debut book, which was Remember Me Gone. It was a much different book. I knew that the story was going to be about a girl who could see dark clouds hovering over strangers' heads when they were in danger, and I knew that she was going to save somebody and something bad would happen. But that's really all I had, and it took me a while to figure out the story and figure out what that would be. And I had a draft, wasn't a very good draft, and I ultimately put it in a drawer for a while and started to write Remember Me Gone, which became my debut. Which, to give that one just a quick synopsis, I like to describe it as Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind meets like Bone Gap. It is about a family who can erase people's unwanted memories and a girl who dreams of taking over the family memory taking business until she discovers that her memories have been erased and the town is not what it seems. I wrote that book, and ultimately that was the one that got me my agent and my publishing deal with Penguin Random House. And when we had the offer, they asked if I had any other pieces of work that I could share with them. And so I shared the first couple of chapters of
You're like, "Let me open my drawer."
I'm
Yeah.
building.
Yeah.
And I pulled out those first couple of chapters, which actually the first couple of chapters are similar in how they ended up being. And luckily, they really liked them. They liked the concept, and that was the book that we agreed would be the second book. So when I went into my first foray into publishing, I knew that the second book would be The Darkness Rises. I just knew that it needed work and some shaping and shifting.
That's really interesting, that's cool. I think that's really common where it's The Darkness Rises seem to be like maybe it was a little bit more polished because you handled it with more care, and versus something else where you're like, "Let's just see what we have here." Like the Remember Me Gone. I haven't read it. I'm gonna add it to either maybe my audiobook list or my reading list, one way or the other, because I the cover reminds me of it too. Like it like sets that eerie vibe of this is yeah, buckle up. Like you
Yeah,
gotta
yeah.
prepare for some from intense feelings that maybe you didn't know that you're gonna be confronted with. But yeah, I that's awesome that you were like, "Funny you should ask, I've got something," and that I love that they were on board because that's something to be said about your writing style and how you can engage someone just in the first few chapters. But also, I think this is it's an important book. What and we can get political or not, but it's just whatever the side of the aisle you're on, or not. I shouldn't say side of the aisle, maybe side of the issue, because I know mostly it's one side or the other, but I think like sometimes there's crossover there in some of those opinions regarding this huge like American debate. But yeah, like at the end of the day, I think this is such an important book, and and I love what you did with it. I love what you did with it where you just started off with, "Oh, I know that this girl has a supernatural power, a paranormal power, like a it's not like based on 100% reality." But that's where you went with it, and I thought that was so interesting. So I like when I would give the description to people when they would be like, "Oh, what are you reading?" And I said, "Oh, it's about," even before I started reading it, I was like, the summary says it's about this girl, this teenage girl who, she sees dark clouds over someone's head when they're about to die, and so she tries to save them, and then one person she saves ends up committing a mass shooting. And right there, they're like, "Oh, shit."
Yeah, things
So,
get real
that's why I'm
fast.
just yeah, like, that's such a, like you pulled it off. You pulled it off. And so that's why I'm glad
Yeah.
that I was able to read this book. And so hopping off of your background, your experience compared to the first book, and I want to dive into the research a little bit. I imagine research was just you probably fell down like a bunch of rabbit holes while you were just gathering information, gathering facts, and not just about the issue at hand, but maybe also, I don't know, writing from the point of view from a teenager. Like what I want to explore all of that, like how you got in the headspace, if you approach this the same way as your previous book, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think the first person narrative really helped to make it personal. A couple of things happened. I have realized now in hindsight that I use my writing to process. So if you ever want to psychoanalyze me, pick up one of my books and you can dive into my head. But what I mean by that is I actually did not set out to write a book that explored my feelings on shooting and gun control. That wasn't my intention. I set out to write a paranormal thriller. That was the idea that I had. And if you read my author's note at the end of the book, where I talk about I was writing the story, I was trying to figure out what it was going to be, and there was a shooting, and I found myself kind of turning down the podcasts, flipping through, like not wanting to pay attention. And there was just this moment, what am I doing? It was almost this sense of, oh God, another one. Let me just try to brush this off into the background. And how can we do that when you're talking about kids that are involved in this and lives that are being taken? It's just a horrible thing. And I'm also now a mom. And so when I sat down to write the book, this kind of, I don't know if, I guess you could call it guilt of how I'd reacted to this horrible thing made its way into the pages of the book, as well as I think just me processing the reality of my daughter is going to go to school in a world that looks like this. And me as a parent, I'm going to have to deal with that and figure out how do you do that. So a lot of it, the research was digging into me, if that makes sense. And I didn't realize what had happened until after the book was written, and then I was revising and trying to make it better. And then in that revision process, I had the good fortune with this one, my revision was with an editor, as opposed to the first one I was figuring out how to write a book and how to
Mm,
do it with like critique partners and things like this. This one I had an editor, and she really pushed me to think about the impact on the community. So that's where a lot of the research came in for me, is researching, well, what did communities do in these moments? How do they come
yeah.
together? How do they give each other strength? And it's gut wrenching, but it's also in some ways heartwarming the way that they do pull together, that you have groups of friends who really stand each other up. So some of that comes through in her relationships with friends. Whitney is very much trying to isolate herself. She feels very guilty. She's putting herself on an island. Meanwhile, her best friend is out there saying, I need help. I need to talk to somebody. Let's talk to each other. Let's be there for each other. And it takes the whole of the book to really get to that place of realizing you need your friends, you need your family. You can't just punish yourself and be on an island. A lot of that came from what has happened in communities that have been ravaged by these things, where as hard and as difficult as it is, it actually does pull people together because they need to rely on each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's how do you tap into that experience without thankfully having experienced it yourself? And I'm a mom of two little boys, and so I one is in elementary school, the other's in preschool. So I'm like, I'm right there with you. It's you think, oh, it's everybody thinks, knock on wood, it's not going to happen, but it can happen anywhere. It can happen in any community, no matter you think your neighbor's kids, no matter what you think of like your law enforcement, everything that people are putting in place, the programs that are hoping to, I don't know, it's just there's so many nuances, there's so many moving parts into the big picture of what this issue is and what makes an individual commit such a heinous act. And there's so many steps I feel like that we could just start with, and for some reason it's not being done. And I wouldn't say for some reason, like I have an idea of why it's not. And like I said, we don't need to get too deep in like to this whole political thing, but we can still give our opinions. It's just obviously I what is it, Mental Health Awareness Month. Obviously that's a huge thing. I can't imagine a person feeling so messed up. We can swear on this podcast, feeling so fucked up and so just fuck everything that they feel like that's a statement they have to make.
Yeah.
And it's so fucked up. It's so messed up. It's so heartbreaking too, because it's like, where did I I try to like maybe I don't want to justify it, but I try to like maybe explain it, make sense of it. But then it's at the same time, it's who failed you? Like what possessed you to do this? And it's because so I went to NIU. I'm in the Chicago area. I went to NIU, and my 21st birthday at Northern Illinois University, there was a shooting at my school. So it was just like and I'm in my mid to late 30s now, and so that still has a lasting effect on me. And not even just mass shooting, it's like gun violence in general, or like I lost my niece to self-inflicted firearm. And so it's just it begs the question like how many what change can we make if we just did something? If we put like protections in place, if we put a policy in place and
Right.
held people accountable. I feel like this is just my opinion, maybe my semi naive opinion. I feel like a lot of responsible gun owners have no problem with a 3-day wait period or a background check. I feel like a lot of responsible people who aren't just fucking crazy or compensating for something or have something maybe wrong with them. I feel like a lot of them have no problem with making the gun ownership qualification, eligibility, ownership more responsible.
Yeah.
I wanna believe that, and I wanna meet them halfway, but it's just at the end of the day, I just feel like there's a very obvious something that is the common denominator.
I
It's the
mean, if you believe the
common
stats, it would say most people do support gun control and gun legislation, whether or not they choose to own a firearm. The majority of Americans do. And I had to go through and figure out some of these stats too, and I cite them in my author note. And I was
You've done a ton of research. I saw the end of the book, the end of, like, your notes,
yeah,
and you
staggering.
imploring the reader to look research on their own.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's staggering how much it's gone up in recent years, and it's staggering when you look at the US compared to other countries. I think to say that guns aren't the problem, if guns weren't the problem, then this would be a more universal and global problem. Yet it's not. It is a uniquely American issue. It is a uniquely American thing. Certainly, you have atrocities that happen in other countries too, but just not to the level that you do in the US. So I find it hard to believe that access to guns is not one of the drivers of why the frequency is so high here, and you don't see that same level of frequency in other countries that have stricter gun laws. So yeah,
A 100%. Like, you see yeah, absolutely. If there's you probably know better than anyone. You look up policies from other countries, and I don't know, I think I saw something where it was, like, Japan, they take you through the whole class, and they, like, have a certain it's almost like a test that you have to pass in order to, like, own a gun, and, this was, like, some information that I didn't research it deeply, but I just came across it, I don't know how many years ago, and it was just it's there's a way to go about it, and it's okay. One thing I will never understand is the phrase, like, "Your God-given right." Like, God has nothing to do with it. I don't know, I'm not a very religious person, but I'm like, I'm pretty sure God doesn't feel like you have the right to own or use a firearm. Maybe to defend yourself, but even then there's a different approach, right? Like, even then there's a different approach if you wanna be religious about it. It's just something that I don't understand, and then I wanna be like my brother brought up a good point where it's just unfortunately, it's just from the Constitution, it's ingrained into our American culture that, like, there's really no way to just rid of it.
Yeah, and I think most people, it's not even saying, hey, abolish them, right? That would be an extremism. It's really just control them and make sure that they are in the hands of responsible people who have gone through the right background checks, who have the right support system in place. And also, without going down another rabbit hole, there's also cases to be made for more mental health awareness and support in the country as a whole, especially around young people when you are dealing with big complex emotions, and people need to have that support too. And unfortunately,
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, they either don't have access to it, don't have the right support that they need in their communities, and in some ways it's stigmatized, especially for the male population in the US, but broadly around talking about your mental health. I do. I'm glad to see more and more people talking about it, mental health awareness
Oh,
month,
yeah.
and it does seem like mainstream is talking about that being a challenge,
Yeah.
and it's something that we need to get to the root cause of and fix. But that's certainly an element of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the younger generations now, the one that are, like, on the cusp or, like, currently newly eligible to vote, like, my niece, she's 20, and I'm just so in awe of her unapologetic openness. I love it. And I just see the people that in her generation who are just like, things are looking bleak. Like, why are you old geezers not doing shit about these things?
Yeah,
This is the world that we're inheriting. And they're absolutely right. And there's just I think just the openness has trickled down to where they're like, this is bullshit. They're calling people out on their shit, and they're being open about themselves too. And obviously the world of social media and online outreach has facilitated that. But I'm even if it's problematic, I'm here for it. I'm here for the good and the bad. Like, I appreciate the good and the bad that comes out of it
Yeah.
because it's just yeah, like you said, like the mental health thing, like I have 2 little boys. I just wanna make sure that they're not growing susceptible to the problematic, like, rhetoric online. They're not gonna get sucked into they're not gonna get sucked into the algorithm, and I just want them to know that if I'm not even trying to make them rocket scientists, as long as they're, like, good
Mhm.
people, they have a good head on their shoulders, and that they understand the value of a life, like, it 'cause I think that a lot of the times it comes down to it, and even if they have mental health issues, want to help them figure it out. I've been struggling with my own mental health, I've got a good hang on it. It's taken a long time, but I've got a good hang on it, but it's unfortunate that so many of these it's one person who is struggling has that much of an impact,
Yeah.
tragic impact on the bigger picture and the larger community when it was just like I don't know. I don't wanna say like, "Oh, one phone call could have helped or one hello could have helped." It's a collectiveness. It's the big picture of
Yeah.
that person's experience.
And some of that is a lot of what Whitney deals with in the book because he does give her signals and she gets a weird tummy feel. And this is a little bit of the survivor's guilt of in hindsight.
Yeah.
There were signals. She could have stuck around and told the police. She could have called somebody and told them what she saw, but she didn't. And that's a lot of the guilt that she has hanging over her. And at the end of the day, she wasn't the one who did the atrocity. She wasn't the one who made those choices, but she holds on to it. And it takes her a while. It's her own mental health struggle towards the end to realize like it's okay to not be okay and to need to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
You have to go through all
Absolutely. And just for the mind of a teenager where she's if I was confronted with that situation, I might be in, like, a bigger mess than she is, but she's still in the thick of the peer pressure, the socializing, whether she wants to socialize or not. But I'm thinking now, I don't if I don't wanna go out and see people, I don't have to, but in high school, you gotta go. You
yeah.
and that's she tried to lay low because she quit the things she loves and, like, with dancing, and then she the one connection I do wanna like, talk about that with the one connection that she does have is with her grandma, the
Hmm.
one significant tie to the one person that can understand what she's going through, which I think is so important, and it's just I it's so heartbreaking that that's it skips a generation, right? Like, she can't go to her mom, but she has to go to her grandma who's maybe on, like the clock is ticking, and so it's and then her grandma won't even Grams is also hiding
And that's where she gets
something that's crucial, right?
it's ultimately her grandma who teaches her that this ability we have it scares people, so keep it to yourself. And
It
I think
does.
that was true
I
for
love
her.
how you incorporated that where she creeps people out.
Right, right.
By just trying to be like, how do you subtly tell someone like, "Hey, go to the doctor?" I don't
You're gonna die. You might want to see
it
about
she
that.
yeah, like, she's like, with, one of her classmate who's got cancer, like, she sees a little gray and she's, "Hey, when's the last time you got checked?" And it's just fucking weird.
Yeah,
It was such a realistic, like, interaction, and I loved it because yeah, it's creepy, and it's hard to be in that position to be like, "How do I approach this?" Like
yeah, yeah, and I think it was interesting. I don't want to use the word fun, but it was an interesting thing to explore her world after, where she tells herself, "You can't save people," because now I realize there are butterfly effects, but she can't not save people because that's just inherently who she is. So the reader gets to see those struggles on the as she's trying to tell herself, "Well, you can't save them because what if they go off to do something terrible? Ah, but you got to save them." So that struggle being very real, and to her, it's less about I think the weirdness because she's been doing that her whole life and now it's more about the fear of well, what happens after and am I responsible for somebody else's actions or not.
Yeah, and that's, like, kind of the existentialism of it. It's if I choose not to save this person and they turn out to be, like, just a wonderful person, and then you chose not to save them because you weren't sure, and it's so complicated. It's like a simple thing. It's okay, as a reader, I was like, "Okay, what I if I don't save this person because the last time I saved someone, they committed something horrible, and then if I don't save this next person, but then it turns out their life deserved to be saved." It
Yeah.
just
And you never know, and I think that's ultimately we in any given day, we could be paralyzed with indecision if we let ourselves just really think about that. Or after something bad happens, thinking about, well, what if I had done this instead of this? Those are the kinds of spirals that are really hard to climb out of, and you can't undo what's been done in the past. And sure, you could have made another choice and maybe things would have ended up differently, but that's not how it went. So holding yourself to that, spiraling into all of the what ifs, is not a healthy or a good place to be. And it takes her quite a while to realize that piece of it.
yeah, absolutely, 100%. So, like, continuing on, like, I have a list of questions, and I'm like, I feel like we're just boom, because it's really easy to just get carried away with this conversation. So, how you might have touched on this before. So, how did you get into the headspace of handling these heavier themes? Like, I don't know, did you have a ritual where you just had to get yourself in the zone of from your normal life, and then it'd be like, okay, I'm gonna get sit down and write. Like, how did you get yourself there?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm pretty good at compartmentalizing myself when it comes to writing because I do have a day job. I'm also a mom. I have a life outside of writing. And to even finish a book, I realized that if I create too many rules or boundaries, like the lighting has to be this way and I can only write in this spot when the sun is rising over my shoulder, otherwise, if I create too many rules, I would never write. So I've gotten really good at this is the time I have. Now it's time to turn it on. And usually, what I'll do is just go back up a few paragraphs and read. And that's enough to set the stage and to turn everything else off. But it has taken many years of practice to get there and to get to that ability of like, all right, I got time to write. Now it's time to get in the mindset. So you just have to train yourself to do that. And for me, it's just been about training myself to do that just to write. And I think because of that level of skill and practice that I've developed over the years, it was easier, even despite the heaviness of the book and the darkness of the story, to, all right, here's my 30 minutes of today that I get to sit down and work on this. I'm going to turn it on really quickly. I also do a lot of,
Yeah.
I have a notebook where like some of my best ideas come to me when I wake up in the morning. I think I just am like dreaming of what it is I want to do. So I will in the morning jot down the notes about the thoughts that I have. And that helps when I do sit down to write. I'm like, all right, I had an idea for what I wanted to do next. How does that fit into that?
Oh, that's a good system because I've heard of people like quickly writing down their dreams when they wake up.
Mhm.
But I've also heard about people writing down ideas, and I guess maybe it could be one and the same. But yeah, I've never done that, but that's so fascinating that you were like, "No, I'm gonna jot this down and save it for." You trust yourself. You trust the process. You're like, I know that I'm gonna come back to this later, but I know that if I don't make some sort of note, then it might be lost to me."
Yeah.
And that's
Oh, I know it'll be lost.
yeah.
Definitely done that. I'll remember this. I'm going to hit that snooze alarm and not write it down. And then when I'm fully awake, oh, I know it was brilliant. What was it? So just think about that little window when you just first wake up. If I don't write it down, it, I could lose it, and I don't want to.
Like, you learn the hard way.
Idea that felt
And I
brilliant. You'll never know if it was or if it wasn't.
right, and I imagine that's probably no matter what genre you're reading or no matter what maybe no matter even what, like, kind of project you're working on. Maybe it's not doesn't have to be a book. It could be, like, anything. You're just, like, waking up and jotting something down that kinda just pops into your head, and then later you're like, "Oh, shit, like, actually, let's see what's here."
Yeah, I don't always work on the timelines that we want them to. So if you're going to be open to new ideas and new thoughts, instead of trying to corral them into working in a specific time that works best for you, I've just found let yourself be open to them, find a system that lets them absorb, and then when you can sit down and examine them and give them some time and attention, they're there and they're ready for you.
Yeah, that's hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You gotta figure out what works for you, and also just I feel like maybe when you wake up, it's a different mindset, right? Like, you're in a different headspace where that you when you're awake and ready for the world, it'll be gone.
Right.
Like, you
Exactly.
just
And you're on to the next
yeah,
thing. You got to feed your kid. You got to feed yourself.
yeah,
You think about
like,
that other
you
work
gotta
thing,
get dressed, like, you gotta
right? All those things, all those pesky little things that get in the way of the creativity.
all the social constructs,
Mm.
ugh, we gotta F it all. Let me see here. What okay, I'm gonna throw this at you. You kinda maybe mentioned it. What were the most challenging parts to write, and what were the most enjoyable parts to write?
Yeah, I'll start with the most enjoyable. I think the scenes where she gets to see the darkness. So when I come up with a book idea, it's always concept first. So this idea was always anchored around a girl who could see darkness. So I just had that visual in my head. So I had a lot of fun writing the scenes where she sees those clouds hovering over people's heads and writing the descriptions. So those for me were a lot of fun. And then there's her best friend Marissa, and then the cousin slash best friend of the love interest being Isaac, his cousin slash best friend being Bo. I had a lot of
Oh
fun
yeah, I
doing
forget
their
his name. Yeah,
a
I
lot of fun
like
doing their
that.
interact fun because they get all of the tension relieving funny one liners. So I had a lot of fun just
Like,
getting
what did he call her? Like a sexy nugget or something?
yeah, chicken nuggets. I loved like doing their banter and their interact. And it is
Yeah.
such a because it's a thriller, it's a revenge plot, it's also got the serious undertones. I had a lot of fun like releasing some of that tension through some humor. So those are my favorite things to write. I actually think the hardest part for me in any book is that middle piece, right? You've got the beginning that sets the story up. You've got the ending where all is revealed, and there's some good fun buildups. But then there's this middle part where you got to go from point what like D to point I don't know, pick a letter in the alphabet S. And it's always that middle piece of how do you keep the plot moving and the momentum moving in a compelling and interesting way that feels unique and interesting. So there were definitely some middle chunks that I had to revise and revisit to get it all together in such a way that she was starting to put the pieces together around who is the bad guy, who's after me, the readers putting them together, but hopefully a little bit wrong at times, just the same way that she is, and getting those together in a compelling and interesting way. There were some scenes that got rightfully deleted and rightfully rewritten several times to get me there. So that middle part was a little clunky.
Yeah, I could see that. It's you have the big picture in your head, but you gotta figure out what's an appropriate and sensitive way to bring it all together,
Yeah,
right? It's
interesting. At the
yeah.
end of the day, you want to read a book that keeps you flipping the pages. You don't want to be talked at or preached to. And if you pick the book up, you probably picked it up because it's a thriller and it looks interesting, or it's paranormal, or those elements are what really calls to you. So it's how do you deliver on the promise of a fast
Yeah.
thriller with
Well, you delivered, I will tell you. The extra work was worth it, and plus the cover, because I feel like the cover art will do part of that work for you. The person will see that and be like, "Ooh,
yeah,
it's
I was,
what's this about?" Because I remember I was, telling someone, like I said earlier, I was just giving someone like a brief, little description of it, and they looked it up right away. They're like, "Oh shit, what is it?" And they looked it up, and I was like, "Yes, like that's," because it really is a story that, like, although, yeah, you approach a controversial topic and it is just heavy themes, it's delivered in such a way. I think there's maybe young adult, the whole young adult thing it contributes to that because I think there's something to be said about young adult where I don't know, not nostalgic, but just I think just the approach or the approach to heavy topics. It's just, like, you approach it in a way where I don't want to say it's light, but it's just like the digestibility, right? It's I don't know.
yeah,
But I just remember I think I finished this book in I don't know, a few days because
no,
I
I'll let
just
you hear it.
wanted to know. I wanted to stay in the world. I wanted to stay in your book, and it was not just the subject matter, but it was just the storytelling. The challenging task of how to tell this story. It was just that's most of the battle, I would say, and you accomplished that.
I'm so happy to hear that. And I agree with you on the cover. I feel like I lucked out. That's always such a fun part in the process as an author when you get the first draft of your cover. And this was one where they sent the cover and we were like, ah, that's nailed it. I think we had a few tweaks here and there, but it stayed pretty close to the first draft that they sent us because she really knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. I'm like the text and the graphics and just how it was put all together. It's just the snapshot of it. It's
Yeah.
so attractive.
Yeah,
It's
they
so
say
attractive.
don't judge a book, but let's be honest, we all judge its cover.
Don't judge a book by its cover. That's all you do. That's all you
Exactly.
do. Of course, we judge a book by its cover.
You have to.
That's what gets us, and that's what gets our first impression, whether it's good or bad. And then when we open the book, we're like, "Oh shit!"
Hopefully it
But we're
doesn't.
we
Right.
say, "Don't do it," but we still do it. It's
Yeah, of course. Yeah, 100%. That
yeah.
is number one piece of marketing for any book is what's on the cover and what's on the jacket.
100%, 100%. Okay, so I'm gonna throw this at you again. What advice do you have for Whitney? What advice do you have for Isaac?
Yeah. For Whitney, it is just tell a friend. You don't have to carry you're not Atlas. You don't have to carry the world on your shoulders, and punishing yourself doesn't do anything to help yourself or to help anybody. And you got people around you who care about you and love you. So tell them what's up. Even this ability that her grandma has told her that she can't tell anybody, she didn't have to be alone with it. She could have actually opened up to her best friend and others, and it takes the whole book for her to really get to that sense. So that would be my advice. And Isaac, I just say, keep on being you, man. He's a good guy. I really enjoyed writing him. He just is probably a lot inspired by my husband, who is just a good human being. And I love
Aw.
books that portray male characters and love interests as just good, interesting guys that aren't trying too hard, that are just good people at their core. And I think that's ultimately
Just
him.
like a little swoon.
Keep being a good
I
guy.
know, I do ooh, excuse me. I am one of those people that kinda live for the love, the romance aspects of those stories, and it was just he yeah, he did no wrong. It was just kinda even when he was being, like, mysterious or shady, is like he had good reason to be a little iffy about certain situations, and yeah, I just remember I was like, "Oh, little poor little baby, poor little sweet summer child." And he just felt like he couldn't be honest about it. He didn't want to. He didn't want to like that to be his thing. And
Yeah.
I just yeah, I respected that. And but I also was like, oh, Whitney, just keep doing what you're doing. You're gonna get the boy. You're gonna get him. Like he's into you. It's okay. Like
Yeah, but of course,
'cause
they're still feeling each other out. They had to
yeah,
get
they're
to
not adults. I feel like if they were 20 years older, it would have happened obviously a
yeah,
much more accelerated rate because
yeah.
it's like, oh, we're adults. Like
Maybe hit up the
in
bar,
high
have some
school,
drinks, let it slip what really happened, and get through it all.
yeah, as simple as it is. I don't know. We could say things are simple for us now, but even so, it's like still very calculated. Yeah. I don't know. I always tell people like I've been with my husband for 15 years, but if I was single tomorrow, I would not know what the fuck to do.
Oh no,
I would not even know how to if I wanted to not be single. I can't imagine if if I was single, if I would wanna change that. I don't know how I would approach that task.
yeah, no, no, thanks. Thankfully, we don't have to, right?
Right.
Knock on wood, knock on something.
Yes, knock on
Well,
all the
that's
wood,
cool.
absolutely, 100%. But yeah, like, going off your first advice to Whitney, uh, there was something that you said that sparked something in my brain. Sorry, can you repeat your advice to Whitney so, like, maybe it could spark something in my brain?
Yeah, it was tell somebody, talk to a friend. You don't have to carry
Yeah,
it all.
so her best friend, I feel like I related to her so much because I feel like when it comes to my best friend, I tend to be selfless, and I related to her so much in that regard where try not to be spoiler free, but she was her part in it, she blamed herself for what she didn't do, but she's ignoring what she did do, and
Right.
it's because of her love for her best friend, and
Hmm.
it's the and I could totally relate to that because I just like, I love my best friend so much, like, I have 2 of them, like, one's, like, from 14, one of them's from 12, and it's just, like, I can't yeah, like, without even thinking, I think I would do what Whitney did,
Yeah.
without even thinking, without even, like, instinct, that would carry over to take that action and to just look out for my best friend,
Yeah,
and
I think it's human. We
it's
automatically want to protect the people we love and care about, and that's was she always protects and saves others, and her instinct was to protect and save. And of course, when it comes to somebody she loves, she's going to do that even more fiercely. But after the fact, I think that was just such a main issue of why she was punishing herself and feeling so guilty, because it was just all of these choices she made that maybe she could have done in her mind done differently. But I don't think any of us would have done anything different.
oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, and then without, again, trying to be spoiler free, it's she eventually learns the hard truths of that.
Yeah.
She gets little notions to forgive herself for the choices that she made, and yeah, and I think that's so important because as the reader, I was like, first of all, what happened? I want to know the full story. Let's get to it. Like for the frustration of the reader, I was like, okay, come on. What I want to hear the full story,
Not in the
but
back, so you'll keep reading.
yeah, exactly. No, that's the point. That's why you do what you do. But then the other side of it, I was just like, it added to the existentialism, right? Like added into the big question. If you could save a one person versus eight, or you could
Right.
save two people versus 12, but the two people that you're saving are like
Your
your
family,
kids or
your
vice
friends.
yeah, and it's tough.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, it's just so human. And I think that's why I related to Whitney so much because I don't know that I would make a decision and find a way to forgive myself for it, justify, and just like a quick. Well, it's just because she didn't. I feel like I don't want to. I don't want to give away too much, but yeah, it was just you did a good job of making readers like challenge their own psyche, their own I don't know, what do you want to call it? Like the $1,000,000 question.
So what would you do?
Would you steal bread to feed your family? Would you save a person even though they might kill 8 people?
Yeah, and then would you behave the way that Whitney did after the fact? I think the other thing, she's very focused on the butterfly effect in the negative, right? But then there's the butterfly effect of the positive. The what if you save a person and they go on to do wonderful things? And
Exactly.
I think that ultimately, to move forward, she has to embrace that piece of it. Otherwise, she'll just keep spiraling forever. It is a little bit of that mindset of I could spiral in the negative or I could spiral in the positive. I'm going to make this choice to assume from here on out, whoever I save will do something good and that I'm putting good into the world by doing the right thing to begin with.
100%. Yeah. Ugh. But still takes a while for her to get there.
Oh, yeah. You've got to go
It
through it a
takes
little bit.
yeah, she's gotta go through it and oh god. 'Cause yeah, it's like her best friend, and then her brother, and then her mother. It's like she hides herself from her closest people, and then
Mhm.
she has no choice but to the jig is up. She's gotta explain herself,
Right.
and
And I think it's through the
it
force that she learns, like, oh, maybe I should have just been doing this all along.
'cause people like, "Is it true? Okay, I think I believe you." Like,
Right.
they have to see it in action, and then when the actual perpetrator is revealed, I'll give you that credit, did not suspect it. I was like, "Oh, is it this person? Is it this person? Is it this person?" I'm the kind of reader who's maybe I don't catch on to things immediately. Sometimes I do, but sometimes I'm like really slow about it. But I think I enjoy that. I think I enjoy that I'm not up and up about it.
Yeah.
Um, it adds to the experience. But yeah, I was like,
Good, good. I always love it when people can't tell, but my hope is if somebody does figure it out, that there's enough of the other layers behind the what really happened when you finally get to see the scene of the night that it went down, that there's several other surprises in there too. But I'm really hoping people can't figure out who it is. There's enough finger pointing in opposite directions. They get it a
yeah, because
little wrong.
there was enough motivation, but it was like it wasn't completely obvious, and it was masked by so many other possible people. So it was
I love to hear
yeah, I'm just gonna give you all the kudos for
it.
delivering and telling this story in a very captivating way, and just approaching the subject matter, yeah, like you said, like without shoving it down our throats, with just, hey, this is a real problem, but here's my book, here's my story on top of it. It was just I so enjoyed it, and I think I finished it in 2 days. I don't know. It was just like very easily digestible, and I related to Whitney, and I loved the little tidbit of the love story because it complicated her gift or curse, complicated any normalcy she wanted, like any normal teenage life that she maybe had a right to. I don't know. I get so deep into these stories and I'm like, I anybody should read this, even though obviously people who are into thriller, people are into YA, into mystery, but just people who can handle the controversial topic and maybe not agree with it. I feel like there's a lot of people that agree with it, like we said before, but like people who don't agree with it, I feel like it would benefit them. And even though I don't know, that we could all wish.
That's right.
We
That's
could
right.
all wish.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad you liked it. Makes me happy. It
Well,
makes my day.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, let's see here. Stacy Stokes, what are you working on that what's next for you that you could talk about?
Yeah, I have a couple of things in the hopper. So I've actually been taking a little bit of a break from YA and from thrillers to take my first dabble at writing a children's horror novel. I always, growing up, I loved the scary books. And especially as a young kid, I remember discovering scary stories to tell in the dark, and it just scared the ever loving shit out of me. And I wanted to be more afraid, but there weren't a lot of books at the time in the library that were super scary. So I've always had it in my head that I wanted to write a scary book. So I am currently working on a scary children's book about a vengeful, murderous shadow who wants a playmate. So that's been fun. But then there's a couple of other paranormal thrillers that have been calling to me. So one, the best way I would describe it is in the Beast, but the Beast is a serial killer and Beauty wants revenge. So that's been fun to dabble into. And then I just started outlining another idea. Speaking of like shower moments, waking up with a new idea. This one is brand new this week, but I'm actually into it. Do you remember the book The Lovely Bones? What
Oh, yeah.
what if the Lovely Bones was actually she was trying to figure out who killed her and also had to save a life at the same time from the other side. So
Like
that's
a more investigative approach. Yeah.
like who did it, and also the person, the police who are actually doing it as they get closer and closer, that they themselves might be the person investigating the crime might be at risk. How can she save them? So I've been toying with that as well. So lots of murder and mayhem in my world over here.
So that you have a niche?
No, right? At least I'm clear in what my lane is. But it has been fun to dabble
Right.
in another spooky children's lane.
What what kinda draws you to that? Is there a reason in particular why you stick to that path, stick to that genre?
Yeah, I think it's because it's what I started reading when I really fell in. So my mom always had a book in her hand to an embarrassing degree. I remember we'd be at the grocery store and she would pull out a paperback from her purse, and you're just like, Mom, stop it. That's so embarrassing. But she loved scary books and thrillers like The Girl in Danger thriller or Stephen King horror. It was something like that that was always in her back pocket. When I was young, I used to sneak pages of Stephen King. And then when I was early teen, probably like junior high, I discovered the young adult section of the bookstore. And specifically, the authors were like Christopher Pike and R.L. Stine, where you had those thrills. And it just stuck with me. So I think it just has to do with that's when I fell in love with reading, like really, truly fell in love with books and wanted to start writing books. And I gone with the type of books that young Stacy liked to read is what I enjoy writing.
See, yeah, I'm gonna I wish I only hope my kids would have that drive, that curiosity for books that you have, because my 6-year-old, my first grader, he's gonna be 7 this summer, and I'm like, one time he told me, "I just don't like reading that much," and it broke my heart. 'Cause they for the first grade teacher, she's, like, really good about, "Okay, it would be really great if what we recommend is you read or have them read 15 minutes a night, 20 minutes a night." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm all for that." But then I'm also like, "I'm reading." Like, but it's troubling to force him and be like, "No, it's time to read." Even though he can pick his own, they have a weekly library day where they can pick their own books to take home for the week. But I've noticed that he loves Pokemon, but he's also really interested in space and planets. So, at least that's the ones that I've noticed him picking up from the library and him picking up on his own. Like, I caught him reading it without me saying, "Okay, read a book." So, I acknowledge that. That's awesome that you were like when you got older, it just never left you. It was just a part of your personality, and now you're a fantastic writer. I love that. Now that not that I'm like want my kids to become a writer, that's fine if they don't, but I feel like reading is so no matter what you are, if you're an engineer, if you're an astronaut, if you're like a corporate executive, like just
Escape, yeah.
read.
Great way to get yourself out. Well, it sounds like maybe you have a little future science fiction lover on your hands. So when he's
I hope so.
old enough,
I hope so.
put, put Ender's Game in his hands as soon as he's old enough to
Oh
read.
yes,
Oh,
yes. I like that was one of the things that like my husband and I both read, although Ender's Game was fantastic, but then it was like, oh God, there's 12 books in this
yeah,
series.
never went. I tried, and I realized I'm not a deep science fiction person. But that
Right.
book, I feel like science fiction lover or not, that book is fantastic.
Exactly. It was very well written and it was very engaging, but yeah, that's a commitment.
Yeah, but you
When
can
there's like a million amazing books out there and I have a million books on my to be read list. It's sorry, buddy, Ender. Yeah, take a step back. You're not up on the you're not up on the list
yeah,
right now.
we've all
Because
got our.
right now, like I've been reading the Throne of Glass series, and
Oh, yes, I did all of those. They're fantastic. So
so
good.
I have not read Kingdom of Ash yet. I've put that off because I want to catch up on this stuff.
Fantastic.
But it's yeah, because oh my god. And that's also maybe because I'm like putting it off because
Yeah, you don't
I
want it to
know
end. I had to take some breaks
yeah, I
from
don't
reading
want it to
too much
end and I
fantasy.
anticipate heartbreak and I even though when I'm on like Instagram and all the memes are like so spoilery.
Yeah, that's a great anything Sarah J. Maas is fantastic.
Oh my god, I haven't even read ACOTAR. I asked my friend who was like, "Okay, I'm ready to go into the Mott's what should I start off with?" She's going to Glass, and I was like, "Everybody says ACOTAR." She's people have no taste. They just like the Shadow Daddy.
Yeah, I haven't done that series either. I did all Throne of Glass. I've done some of the others, but I haven't done all of them. So
Okay,
I'm a
yeah,
big
I'm no,
big fantasy, and I try to pepper in lots of other different genres in between. And sometimes it also depends on the
oh,
writing too.
I'm gonna throw this at you, unrelated to your book opinion. Are you a Kale hater or a Kale lover?
KL being.
You know who Kale is. If you read Throne of Glass, you know who Kale is, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. Sorry. So I read it. I finished it like as soon as the last one came out. So it's been a hot second.
Oh, what, 6 years ago or something like
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah. Sorry, you're talking. So I'm trying to take myself back into it, but
Hale is a Kingsguard who was briefly involved with Aelin, and then he was attacked by the king, so he lost feeling in his legs, and he had to go get healed by the
yeah,
Torsesme, I think that's how you pronounce it. And then Irene healed him, and
yeah, yeah,
Irene is a badass,
yeah,
and
yeah. I was a fan. I
yeah.
remember being a fan of. I liked all
You
the.
don't remember how you feel about Kale?
I think I was a fan throughout it, but gosh, now you're making me think I got to go back and read that.
For Kale, because he's like a whiny little bitch. It's like, yes, but he also goes through a lot of growth. And I had a
Mm.
crush on him where he was like my book boyfriend for a while. Where I was
Yeah,
I was waiting for him and Irene to get together.
yeah, and I think if I'm remembering the reason, and I think it ties into character development through the end of the story. If I'm remembering the character and I'm not getting my fantasies flip flopped, I think there's some stuff that happens towards the end that reaffirms.
Yeah. Be safe and don't spoil it for me.
Yeah, I want
Maybe
to go
I'll
back.
hit you up in a month when when I've had time to finish it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go
Not
back
even a
and
month, like
read the
Kingdom
back
and
in
Ash
my.
is like Kingdom of Ash is like almost 1,000 pages. Like what the
Yeah, yeah. And you get, I listen to audio and then they all string
Oh yeah.
together because I did a whole bunch of them in a block. And then I had to take a mental
Okay, so
break for a while. Yeah. So I'm like, oof, trying to remember like wyverns and wyverns and all kinds of witches and all kinds of fun stuff.
Manon is a force to be
Yes.
reckoned with.
Oh, so good. Yeah. She was one of my favorites. That whole story and plot really.
Oh yeah. Oh
Every
yeah.
time like we get to one of her chapters, I remember being very excited.
It was I think when she was first introduced, I was, "What's going on here?" But then I was like, "Yes, Manon." Like, and it was just like, oh, just
All the different
everything is
coven wits
okay,
and the
spoiler
dynamic.
warning, but then it's like the 13 when they're just coming in like the cavalry. It's like you can hear the background music. It's dun 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 dun.
Totally. And she was such an unlikely hero, the hero that didn't want to
Oh,
be a hero.
absolutely.
It made her.
And so many of the pairings were like they were so sexy. Like so
Mm,
many of the intimate pairings, it was just like, yes, I loved it. I loved it. I couldn't
yeah,
get enough of it. But yeah, I'm like I have not read Kingdom of Ash, and I'm putting it off because I have to catch up with this stuff, but also I'm like,
don't want it to end. Now you're making me be like, I need to read. Clearly, I've forgotten enough of it that I need to go back and revisit
oh
it.
no,
Yeah,
like audiobook, just put that back on the playlist.
certain series that I love that I want to just put it so far back that you forget it and then
Oh
revisit it.
yeah, but then there's so many other books that you're like, oh, I gotta read this too. It's like,
I know. All these writers
It's hard.
continue writing all this good stuff. What are we going to do with it all? So I
God
love the
damn these
advent of audiobooks because you can listen. It can be the backdrop to what
when you're doing chores, you're like putting the dishes away, making your bed, going for a walk.
all the things on the way to work, on the way home from work.
Although the trouble is when I like listen to spicy books and then I'm like with my kids and I'm like, oh shit, okay.
Where I'm like, ooh, I'm just going to pause this. Here, let's put on some Taylor Swift. You like that? Here we go. You got to do the quick pivot. Yeah, she's now old enough that the words have meaning. Unfortunately, I used to just
Right.
put it all
Yeah.
on and
You're just like, I don't want to know when you read this. I don't like I want to know, but I don't want to. I
yeah,
don't know if I
have some
feel like I
time.
want to discuss this with you.
Yes,
Yeah.
but as
See,
long
I
as
have
we're reading,
boys, so it's I don't know. I did like a book event where I my brother was a book like a plus one to a book event and it was uncomfortable because I was like, yeah, sorry, like a lot of these are like probably just basically like porn in chapters and he's yeah. But it was like that's like almost as far as the conversation
I've
went because it was like
definitely had some moments where I'm like making dinner and husband's over on the couch and he has no idea what is playing in between certain
it's like
books.
you blush a little bit and you hope nobody notices, like
Yep, exactly. A certain very popular book involving dragons is one recent
yes!
one, yes. Yep.
See, I did make my husband read that eventually,
Did you?
and yeah, and it was really funny because I was, like, recording, like, his commentary to I guess it's for content, and I was like, because it was hilarious. He was like, "Dana's such a bitch. Fuck him."
He's not wrong.
I know, it was just like, I'm just okay, but proceed. Yeah, so I encourage you if I don't know how your husband is about books, but I encourage you to I because like, with The Throne of Glass, I'm like, "No, this is the next series that you should read," because it's like it's almost akin to Harry Potter, and he loved Harry Potter. So I'm like, I feel like it's akin to Harry Potter in terms of depth and span, but I feel like it's almost better. It's
Yeah.
almost better than Harry Potter. Like it's so I think he would totally enjoy it, and I want to record his reactions and just
My husband,
enjoy it. 'Cause
unfortunately, is like all nonfiction all the time. If you ask him what it's
oh no,
like,
um,
so he does read my books, but the poor guy is it because I'm his significant other, not because
yeah,
he
like my
really
wife
wants
is a
to read his
published author, so I guess I should read it.
right, exactly. But meanwhile, he's reading some like conspiracy book that's based in
Oh, no.
fact. And I think
Well, he's staying informed.
exactly. We're staying informed too, just in the creative sense. We can tell
Right,
you all
yeah.
about mythical creatures and the various covens that potentially.
You find your people, we find our people.
Exactly. Now I'm trying to remember the
Yeah.
coven names. There was like Little Feet, or they all had the funniest names too. You got me. I'm gonna have to go back and reread Throne of Glass. It's official.
Oh, yeah, and then your algorithm's gonna be like, "Throne of Glass."
Yeah, yeah. Heard me and say it closer into my phone, and then I'll start getting the ads.
I know, it's really hard to avoid spoilers because 'cause I'm just like, I'm 1 book left, but I just don't I have to, like, scroll past anybody who's Kingdom Bash or spoilers on my phone, so it's I just wanna, like, read it to almost get it over with and also spare myself, but also, I don't know if I'm ready.
Yeah,
I don't know if
give
I'm ready
it
for
to
it.
yourself when you're like you need something to like really take you out of whatever it is that's going on in your day to day. Your treat to yourself can be that really.
Yeah, or I just need a week off.
Yes, yes.
I just
Well,
need a week to myself, like, where I'm not bothered, where I have no responsibilities, and just read my book. If only all of us can do that, right?
and I
Like with
remember
Mother's Day,
audiobook.
I would like Mother's
There
Day,
you
every
go.
Mother's Day I ask, "What do you want for Mother's Day?" I'm like, "Can I just get 4 hours to myself, like, where nobody like, I'm alone and nobody, like,
Give me a book
bothers
and
me."
some quiet. There you go. Mother's Day
Exactly.
what, in 2 weeks. So maybe that's when you
Seriously, I've been asked, "But can you drop me off at this bar so I could read my book and pick me up at this time?" Like,
perfect.
and it's been a great gift.
Yeah, yeah. I think now
Like,
we know what
really,
you're
that's
going.
all I want, like, anything that I don't know, anything that I have or anything that I want, it's not the gift is time. The gift is time. The gift is peace and quiet. The gift is me time, right? That's, like, what I value.
Yeah, that is a great gift.
100%. Okay, Stacy Stokes, where can we find you online and on social media?
Yeah, you can find me at stacystokes.com. And all of my social handles are Stacy A as in Apple Stokes.
Perfect. Stacy Stokes, The Darkness Rises, that's available now. I recommend it to anybody who's looking for YA, mystery, and who's not afraid of a little controversy. I don't know, but I definitely recommend this book for anybody who's the genre's up your alley. Thank you so much. This was such an awesome conversation. I enjoyed getting a little deep with you and shooting the shit with you. And whenever you got something else going on, feel free to reach out and we can chat again.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. This was a blast. I really appreciate it.
And there you go. That was Stacy Stokes talking about her book, The Darkness Rises. That book is available now. A really good book. I recommend it for people who are into YA and to mystery and who are not afraid of a little bit of controversy in their books. But also with a paranormal twist, I would say. But either way, go ahead and check out the show notes where you can find links where to purchase the book and where to find Stacey on social media. While you're browsing social media, please go ahead and find Cantina Book Club and give me a follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. I really hope you're enjoying the content, but even if you are not an avid book reader, you can still just give me a follow and recommend it to your reader friends just to help me get my content out to the community. And you never know, you might also find a book that you like on here. If you need book recommendations, check out my book reviews on cantinabookclub.com. You can always reach out to me on the said socials that I mentioned and see what I've been reading. Just because I'm also not always interviewing the authors doesn't mean that I'm not always reading. I'm always got something going on up there. But please rate, review, subscribe. Pre-orders help the authors out. Ratings and reviews help the authors out. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.